On Shanador Tully.
Margaret Gahirlock and Taoiseach Can Hin Féin, Tá Road Keegan Shannon. I suppose, as you're aware, Taoiseach, and you've referenced it, the Shannon has a reputation for being an open-minded chamber where ideas are canvassed on all manner of topics, and some of those would struggle to get onto the floor of the Dáil. And I can say that they're often most generally debated here in a much more congenial manner as well than they might be on the floor of the Dáil. But I suppose in recent years, the Shannon has supported motions on a number of issues, and one of those motions would have been extending votes in presidential elections to our citizens, both in the north and abroad. And we're a week and a day out from a presidential election, and many of our citizens do not have the option of voting in that election. And we know that this has been supported in the Assembly in the North and in the Dáil on numerous occasions. I know there was a convention in 2013 on this issue, and there was legislation introduced in the Dáil in 2014. I mean, there was an options paper in 2017, and it's my belief there was legislation produced and it was almost on the brink of a referendum, and then it didn't happen. So promises were made but not kept, and I really think we are radically out of step globally on this issue, because there are 153 other nations who allow their citizens to vote in elections while living abroad. For example, British citizens can vote in parliamentary elections even though they're not living in Britain at the time. And I just feel Irish people feel, if they're not living in the 26 countries, they feel like second-class citizens. So whether they're living abroad or they're living in the north and they don't have a say, they somehow feel their citizenship isn't worth the same as the citizens who are actually living here in the state. So I'm just asking if it's something that could be addressed without delay and ensure that it's not the same case in 7 years' time in the next presidential election. And I know there are some people calling for a reform of the method of selecting a presidential candidate. So maybe the two issues could be looked at, addressed, and changes made to the Constitution in relation to that. The Shannon also supported the Occupied Territories Bill, which is currently making its way through the Oireachtas. But I mean, the current government draft is a heavily amended version of the bill that was first introduced here by Senator Francis Black some 7 years ago. And I mean, the original bill proposed a much broader prohibition. I mean, it sought to criminalise the provision of goods and services and the extraction of natural resources from the occupied territories generally. So I really feel that the bill needs to go forward in its original fashion, in a strengthened fashion. While there is a peace in Palestine, it's a fragile peace. I do hope it endures. But we have to remember that, that there's been discrimination and there's been illegal settlement in both the West Bank and in Gaza for many decades. And there needs to be repercussions for Israel for this, and this needs to be addressed, prevented from going forward, and actually the settlements reduced. A few years ago, Cathaoirleach of the Shannon, Mark Daly, held a series of public meetings here in the Shannon on the constitutional future of this country. And it was an excellent initiative by the Shannon. It had cross-party support and support from independent Shannonjury. And I think the Shannon led the way. This leadership was followed by the Good Friday Agreement Committee, which last year produced two highly significant reports on the constitutional future. One dealt with finance and economics, the other on the role of women in the constitutional debate. And I was a member of the Good Friday Agreement Committee in the last term and was part of the discussions around those reports. And in my view, the report on finance and economics is a blueprint on how we move from where we are now to a new united Ireland. This report had the support of all the parties and independents on the Good Friday Agreement. It recommended to the government that it takes the lead in planning for a new Ireland. The report also said that there are no insurmountable economic or financial barriers to reunification, and it recommended that the first steps to publish a green paper on setting out a vision for a united Ireland, to set up an Oireachtas committee dedicated to the preparation for a united Ireland, and to carry out extensive and thoughtful public engagement north and south. The report did put a great emphasis on dialogue, and the Good Friday Agreement Committee, in preparing the report, listened carefully to people from all backgrounds, particularly from a unionist and a Protestant background, who came to the committee and made presentations. This report was presented to government, but the government has yet to respond to it. So I do want to just mention and commend, and I think everybody in the Shannon respects the work of the Shared Island Unit, which you, Taoiseach, established. But I think it's now time for that to widen its horizons. I would encourage you to study the report of the Good Friday Agreement and to consider implementation of its recommendations.